Hello, I'm Chris, and today I'll be reading a fanfiction called Dreams from My Farter by Susannah featuring Barack Obama. Okay, Chapter 1, 11th of November 2009. Dear Diary, today the most horrific and awful thing occurred. I don't even know if the strength to explain it exists within me. As you can see by the ink runs on this page, I have cried many tears over this matter. However, I shall attempt to describe my woes. At the end of a long hard day of presidential issues, I felt the need to relax and unwind with a long, hot, steaming bath. I submerged myself into the soapy water, scented with the fragrance of my favourite lavender bubble bath. There's nothing like a bath to take your troubles away. The day had been particularly stressful, as through all my boring meetings I sat through, I was holding in a big chunk of methane. As I chilled in the tub, I remember there being no better place to release such a chunk than in a bath. I enjoyed the bubbles rising to the surface of the water and the terrific smell that protruded afterward. Moments later, my wife Michelle entered the presidential bathroom, claiming to need the toilet. Casually, I smiled in her direction, sure that the odour would be masked by the scent of the lavender bubble bath. Oh, how wrong I was. Michelle stared straight at me and her jaw dropped. A surprised expression adorned her beautiful features. She looked like Edvard Munch's The Scream, but angrier. I could tell at that moment that she was appalled by my supposedly clandestine actions. Not only had I given the game away, but I also disgusted her beyond measure. "Barack!" was all she said, or shouted, rather. Rage encompassed her, in what could only be described as a huff. She exited the bathroom in a furious stride. I was so ashamed. Our relationship could have been ruined. Later that evening, things worsened. I had plucked up the courage to face her once more after that horrifying ordeal, and entered the presidential dining room for dinner. The table was already laid, set with my favourite meal, macaroni cheese, with little cut-up hot dogs. Michelle and my two daughters, whose names I cannot remember, were already sat at the table as I joined. I could tell they all knew and were still furious with me. You could have cut the tension in that room with a knife. I wanted to relax things a little, so I eased up and began to speak. "So, how are things?" I asked. But I already realised that was not the only sound I made. The sound of my methane expulsion filled the silence, and the room with its stench. I was guilty once more. Michelle gave me that look again, and I felt so ashamed of myself I could have died. She said not a word to me and immediately stormed out. I looked at my daughters and attempted to apologise. "I'm sorry," I began, and they just looked at each other and shook their little heads. A moment later they were gone too. I looked around at the now empty room, laced with despair and shame. Appalled with myself and also heartbroken, I held my head in my hands and just began to cry. Chapter 2. Chapter 2, 11th of November 2009. My heart aches, readers. The discharge of my bodily gases has occurred once more, this time more ghastly than before. And once again, I do not want to admit to you the dreadful occurrences which have presented themselves within my presidential household, but I feel I must tell you. But before I cross that particular bridge, I shall continue the story where I left off. Having wept at the presidential dining table for well over 10 minutes, I gathered myself up and dragged myself up the presidential staircase and into the presidential bedroom. There, I collapsed on the bed and wept once more. My sobs grew louder and louder, and I could no longer hear, swallowing in self-pity. I decided to pick up the phone. I dialed the number of my reverend since boyhood, and waited anxiously as I heard the phone ring. I willed him to pick it up. "Hello." I finally heard an answer. I was so relieved to hear his voice. "Reverend," I began, "something terrible has occurred, and I do not know what to do. The guilt is almost overwhelming." I could not hide the distress in my voice. "Do you want to confess a sin?" the Reverend inquired with concern. "Is it as bad as the event that occurred when you were 13? "No, Reverend, of course not. I thought we'd agreed to never speak of that again." "Anyhow, I don't know if I have the courage to tell you, what happened. I am a spineless, weak-willed and cowardly man. Barak, I have always thought of you as a courageous, heroic and brave man. I have never once doubted your gallantry. Now, do unburden yourself. I don't know, Reverend. I've been wondering a lot lately whether I'm about to give up this whole president. I don't know, Reverend. I've been wondering lately a whole lot about whether this whole presidency lark is worth it. I've been contemplating other options. Maybe it would be better to give it up. I could possibly relocate to Poland. Maybe that would be a better life for me. What? Barak? Are you crazy? This is irrational and senseless. In fact, it's more than that. It's downright silly. You have so much here. You are admired by your peers. Now, do tell me your worries. No, I cannot, I thought. I thought I could, but I was mistaken. I apologise for wasting your time, Reverend. I hung up the phone, too ashamed to hear another word. Just then I heard a peculiar noise. It sounded suspiciously like someone struggling to expel trapped wind. Intrigued, I listened to the sounds, which were coming from the presidential bathroom. I inched closer and closer to the door, overtaken by curiosity. Then the sounds progressed into what seems to be the squeak of a stream of wind, was passing loudly on the toilet. I gasped. I barged into the lavatory and was stunned by what I saw. In addition, I was traumatised and offended. Upon the toilet sat the blameworthy culprit, my wife, Michelle. How could you? I bellowed. I am hurt. This is the height of hypocrisy. Double standards. I am truly appalled. My wife sat there, awkward and embarrassed. As tears streamed down her delicately alluring cheeks, I could no longer bear to look at her, so I indignantly left the room. Chapter 3, 11th of November, 2009. A couple hours later, the shock still hadn't worn off. At this point, readers, I shall cross the aforementioned bridge and tell you of my third mortification. After another wallow in self-pity and newfound rage, I descended the staircase and entered the presidential living room. There, I found my two daughters, whose names I still cannot remember, sitting on the presidential couch and watching television. It was the music channel, and they were watching teen pop idol Justin Bieber. To my irritation, I could not endure such folly and approached the television to promptly turn it off. I'm sorry, girls, I said, bending down to turn off the set, but I just can't be... Then it happened again. I heard it. The girls heard it. I had once more polluted the White House. The girls faced each other and giggled sneeringly at my shame. Before I had the chance to explain myself, the pair had run away and out of the room. I was saddened and troubled once more, and in the woe I flipped onto the presidential couch with exhaustion. Tears gently slipped down my cheeks. Every cell in my presidential body was woe. Shortly after, the phone began to ring. It must be the Reverend, I thought, calling back to check on me. I don't know if I had the strength to put up with another conversation, but nevertheless I answered the phone. Hello, I grumbled. What now, Reverend? Ah, Barak. Hello, how's it going? Chuckled a malicious Russian voice. Ew. Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, sworn enemy of the United States, I uttered. Why could you possibly be calling me? Didn't I tell you to leave me alone? Barak, my boy, stop mumbling, please. I call only because your wife told me to. She says you two had a disagreement, and she wanted me to talk to you. Ha. Yes, she was so ashamed to apologise to you herself, so she told me to drop the bomb, metaphorically, of course. We wouldn't want that really happening. Ha. Well, yeah, sorry for Michelle. You crazy boy. I was surprised to get her call, actually, comrade. She hasn't contacted me in a long, long time. Not since the night before she got married to you, and we don't really talk much then either, if you know what I mean. Ha. What? What was he insinuating? I had to know. What are you insinuating, Vladimir? I asked, feeling a bit irritated. What? You don't know? She never told you that she and I had a fling? Back in '92? Mwahahaha. This is just hilarious, he cackled. I could not tolerate him any longer, so I hung up the phone. I was engorged with fury once more. How could this be? That little weasel and my wife. I was horrified, and in my rage, I regret to say, I did something very rash. Powered by anger, I flounced into the Oval Office. I needed to get this out of my system. I needed to express myself. I flung myself into the presidential chair and pulled open a drawer from the presidential desk, which contained a big red button, surrounded by black and yellow striped tape. Determined to express my wrath, I slammed my closed fist onto the button. It felt good. It felt like I had gotten it out of my system, and I was glad of it. I allowed myself to calm down as I span my chair, letting my passion subside. I was shocked when I turned to face the door, to see my wife Michelle standing there. She looked remorseful. "I'm so sorry, Barack," she whimpered. "I was a hypocrite, I know, and I was also too hard on you. Sorry, sorry, sorry." She fell, weeping to her knees, and continued to plead, holding her hands like she was praying. I was wrong to be so upset. "You didn't do it deliberately. The only reason it affected me so much was it reminded me of my own problems. I know that's no excuse, but I hope you forgive me." I looked into her wide eyes, wet with tears. She looked sincere, and she was still my wife, my partner in everything, my first lady. How could I stay mad at her? I opened my arms and stood and embraced in what seemed like a long while, as I whispered apologies into her ear. "Things can go back the way they were now, right?" She smiled at me. I wanted to say yes. I couldn't cause her any more pain, but I needed to tell her the truth. "Michelle, I'm so sorry." "What?" she asked, looking a wee bit confused. I almost couldn't speak. "I sent a nuclear bomb to Moscow. I'm so sorry." Chapter 4. Michelle stared at me in disbelief. It was like she couldn't believe what I had just said. I suppose it's a bit shocking. I waited to see how she would respond. "Well," she began, "I suppose we'll have to call Vlad." "What? You have a nickname for him?" I was terribly upset about this, but I was not sure why. "We can't just blame the UK," she continued. "They're always doing crazy things. I'm sure no one will doubt their guiltiness." "But what will the UK make of this? Can we afford to lose them as an ally?" I felt apprehensive. "Oh, they'll forgive us. Anyway, it's not like I have to face any punishment from the Russians. They'll all be dead." I was quite befuddled by Michelle's recommendation. It was not like her to be so reckless, so irresponsible, and so headless. But I could not see any obvious alternatives, so I had to acquiesce, even though I was dreading calling Vlad back with extreme trepidation and dismay. We dialed Vlad's number quickly and sent the phone to loudspeaker so we could both hear Vlad's every word. "Hello?" His sickening voice hit my ears like a deadly toxin. "Oh, Vlad, it's me, Michelle. Barack and I have made a terrible mistake, and a nuclear bomb is on its way to Moscow. It's all the UK's fault, though." "Wow," he sharply inhaled. "I must admit, this is quite upsetting." "Michelle, the only way you can make this up to me is to get over to my house right now." "But it's about to be blown to pieces." "I'm not in Moscow. I'm in my secret mansion." "Oh, the one next to the Black Sea," I chipped in. "Oh, Barry, you're there. You finally forgiven Michelle." "No, my boy, not that one. I'm in the one in DC, you know. The one around the corner from the White House." Michelle and I looked at each other, dumbfounded. "Come on, Michelle, baby," he went on. "You know you want to spend some more time with Vlad." "I'd love to." "Yes, she's coming," I interrupted, "and so am I. I determined not to be outshined by Putin." "Oh, Barry, I didn't know you into that kind of thing. You're welcome to come over." He hung up, sounding smug and haughty. He wanted to, with Michelle and me, at the same time? I was horrified. I looked over to my wife, who was grinning, but I couldn't help but hide the sorrow and anguish bellowing inside me. We tiptoed out the White House, both very conscious to keep quiet as possible. We didn't want our daughters to hear that we were leaving, as they would rouse unwanted suspicion. I myself felt extremely angst-ridden and apprehensive about the deed that we were about to carry out. I had never engaged in deviant or unsavoury behaviour such as this before, but I was determined to prove to Michelle that I could be just as fun and carefree as her beloved Vlad. I was still genuinely disgusted by her giving him a nickname. I cherished the knowledge that I was the only one with a nickname bestowed by Michelle. I was her Obi. She called me Obi when she was feeling playful, when I was endearing, but you can guess hadn't been happening a lot on account of the whole debacle regarding my foul-reeking wind and pathetically feeble rectal muscles. Michelle and I exchanged little communication as we walked round the corner of the avenue. I glanced at her briefly, but couldn't bear to watch her smile at the thought of Vlad, and instead at the pavement for the rest of the short walk there. We stood, staring up at Vlad's secret mansion. It was almost as big as the White House. Terror filled my heart as I beheld the majestic abode. I didn't want to get involved in Vlad and Michelle's liaisons, but I'd rather do that than let him have her to himself. At the moment, I found Vlad more repugnant, loathsome, and abhorrent as ever. I hated his prime ministerial guts. I was desperate to not go through with this. I could not bear the idea of spending the night with Vlad, even if Michelle was there too. "Are you sure you want to go in, Michelle?" I asked, hopeful that she'd changed her mind. "Because we don't have to, you know. I'd rather go home, I would." "Barack, it's fine, let's go." I despised how keen she was. Michelle eagerly banged the golden, ornate, gilded knocker. Those few moments waiting for the door to be answered were complete and utter torment. I secretly hoped that Vlad had choked in his own vodka before he could answer. Alas, I heard that sickeningly nauseating voice of his on the buzzer, telling us we could enter. Curses. So when we went, Michelle giddy as a child, and me solemn as an undertaker. Why, I thought, had this happened to me? "Hey, you guys!" Vlad greeted us enthusiastically as we entered his hall. I must admit I was somewhat impressed by the grandeur and elegance of his secret dwelling, in spite of my presidential self. Michelle was just as happy to see him as she kissed him on the cheek like an old friend. My heart shattered as I ate through this excruciating ordeal. I grunted a bitter hello to my age-old rival. "Do you two want any drinks?" he asked. "Wine, pina colada, chocolate milk?" Although a thirst had developed inside me, I was hesitant to accept a refreshing beverage from my nemesis. Couldn't help but think that if one asked Vlad for a chocolate milk, we'd be presented by something quite unpleasant indeed. "No thanks. We'll both have some wine, thanks," Michelle butted in. "By the sons of Jesus, why was my wife torturing me so?" We were ushered into Vlad's living room, and I was quite taken aback by the decor. The walls were adorned with the heads of deceased bears mounted on plaques. There were grizzly bears, brown bears, black bears, Kodak bears, polar bears, or as I like to call them, nanooks, and even the head of a giant panda. Yikes. Michelle and I collapsed onto the plush red sofa, covered with stylish scatter cushions. One scatter cushion particularly caught my eye. It was red and had the design of a bear's head embroidered in gold thread. As much as I detested Vlad, I couldn't help but admire that scatter cushion. "So, guys," Vlad said, opposite us, setting the wine glasses on the mahogany coffee table in front of us. "Where shall we start?" Well, that kind of talk from Vlad would have scared the living bejesus out of me 5 minutes before. I was strongly subdued and unfazed by him. My mind was wandering. I couldn't help but think about how good that scatter cushion would look in the Red Room of the White House. Michelle was waiting for me to answer, and she probably was conscious to make sure I felt included. However, this was not the kind of question I wished to answer, so I sat silently. After a couple of minutes, it became a bit awkward as everyone was looking at each other, waiting for something to be said. I tapped my foot on the floor and remained quiet. "Barack," Michelle said, sounding exasperated. I decided to speak for her sake. Vlad, can I ask you a question?" "Surely. Are you upset about Moscow?" "I'll get over it." Again, no one spoke for longer than a comfortable amount of time. Michelle and Vlad would probably be disgracing me if I hadn't been there. "This room is very interestingly decorated," Michelle said. Vlad nodded towards the panda. "I killed that one with my bare hands." Gulp. I couldn't have had familiar relations with this man. I couldn't let Michelle have familiar relations with him while I was there. It was horrible. "Shall we go upstairs then?" Vlad got up and headed out of the room. Michelle took my hand and dragged me after him, my entire body trembling. So, we were stood outside Vlad's bedroom. "See you inside," he smiled as he entered, closing the door behind him. "Michelle, we can't do this, for the love of God, we can't." I shook my wife by her shoulders. "It's a bit late for that, Barack. What can we do now?" "Let's just leave now. He won't notice." "But we owe him. We destroyed his city." "He doesn't know that. Please, Michelle. If you love me, you won't subject me to this." My wife looked thoughtful for a moment and looked in my eyes. "Okay, Obi, we can go." I ran downstairs into the living room. The scatter cushion caught my eye again. He wouldn't notice, would he, if I just... He had loads of scatter cushions. He wouldn't care if one get missing. I grabbed it and shoved it up Michelle's dress. "Hide this in your dress," I said. "We can put it in the White House." "Good thinking, Obi. I was thinking this cushion would look nice at ours." "Guys, are you coming?" Vlad bellowed from his room. Michelle and I exchanged a panicked glance while legging it out of the front room. This was Dreams from My Father by Barack H. Obama by Susannah Hogarth. I don't know what I just read, but thanks, Suze.